Hello YouTube, welcome back to Nutkin Farm, and more importantly, Merry Christmas 2025. And while this is a lovely sunny day, it's been very rainy here at Nutkin Farm, and I've gone through one of those weeks where you can't really do a hell of a lot of farming other than the odd bit of whippersnippering and fertilising certain trees. And you can see the results of not being able to farm the land for a little while. And driving around Alstonville the other day, I noticed plenty of farms in a similar condition, but 5 weeks after slashing, this is what grass can look like at this time of the year. And as you can see, there's a fair bit to do once it gets dry enough. Plenty of water still underfoot though, so there's limits to what you can do. Now, this video, if you read the title, is about the art, science and politics of crop forecasting for macadamias. And maybe it is a bit more art than science sometimes, because, you know, here on this particular 344 I've got some nuts, but on a lot of my 344s I have no nuts at all. There are various varieties that seem to be doing okay this year, others that seem to be just having a flat line from the bad conditions we had in pollination and some rain at the wrong periods and that sort of thing. And you know, that also varies by region as well as variety of tree, so putting together a crop forecast must be a little bit difficult, I think, for those who do it. But let's dive into that a little bit more. First of all, why do we need a crop forecast? Well, the best comparison I can give you is with, say, eggs. Eggs are a fresh product that are constantly in demand. People buy them repeatedly to be fresh, and we obviously have to supply them fresh. And lucky enough, we have chickens who are laying all the time, and so there's a constant supply, a constant demand. The price of eggs can vary, and the availability of eggs can vary depending on little things that happen, like episodes of bird flu or that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, there's fresh produce that's been constantly bought and sold. Macadamias belong in a different kind of crop, and that is a crop that's harvested once per year and consumed throughout the year, just like eggs. But we only really have the one chance to produce a crop, and there's one harvest per year that goes over a reasonably lengthy period of time. And so when we try to work out what the price of crops is going to be and how to set prices, they're not so much set on supply and demand, but the expectations of supply and demand. And so what happens every year is that the Australian Macadamia Society sets a crop forecast, sometimes called an initial crop forecast or an original crop forecast, early in the calendar year, predicting that this year Australia will produce X thousand tonnes of macadamias. And that's a process that's done by other countries around the world. Not all of them, but most of the major producers will put out a forecast, and those forecast numbers are taken into account all around the world when they're trying to work out how many macadamias are going to be available for sale. And from that, assuming demand remains fairly constant, you can then get to questions like, well, what price will the macadamias go for, assuming that the supply turns out to be as forecast and the demand turns out again as predicted. So that's why we do forecasts. And if you want to see an illustration of how that works, or how that did work in practice, one of the most entertaining ways to learn is to watch the movie Trading Places, one of Eddie Murphy's funniest films and still a classic today. You know, not only do you get those learnings, you get a barrel of laughs as well. So who does the crop forecasts in Australia? Well, that's done by what's called the Australian Macadamia Handlers Association, and it's a body that's vaguely within the boundaries of the Australian Macadamia Society, but it's a group of processors, and they speak for about 90% of the nuts produced in Australia. The other 10% are from small producers who aren't members, and also from individuals or large farms that make their own shipments overseas without the aid of a macadamia processor. So this Handlers Association sits down and creates an initial crop forecast and publishes that, and that is really the basis on which we are offered as farmers a price for our crop. And therein lies a little bit of the problem, because the more crop the handlers forecast will come in, the more they can justify offering the farmers a lower price for the crop. Obviously, if they're going to predict that a lot of nut is coming in and we're going to have trouble selling all that nut, and therefore we have to offer you a discounted price so that we can achieve those sales, there is an inbuilt incentive on the Macadamia Handlers Association to overestimate the crop. Now, they'll deny that, of course, and I don't care if they do deny it, but the financial incentive is there, whether it's actually taken up or not, to put in a high estimate for the crop. And while that estimate changes during the year, it can go up and down, and this last year it went both down and up. It's that initial one that goes towards the prices we're offered in March, often a notional price. Yeah, if that crop estimate is more optimistic than it should be, and the price is expected to be lower than it should be, well, the farmer unfortunately gets shortchanged by that. And while, you know, notional prices in theory can go up during the year, so if the supply doesn't turn out to be as much and prices go up, well, we're not egg farmers, and this notional price that most of the processors give us doesn't go up, and what you'll find is that the processors just pocket the change. Yeah, if they end up getting a higher price, you'll never know about it. They won't tell you. They'll just give you the price they promised you at the start of the year based on the crop forecast. Now, there are one or two exceptions to that. Marquee is a grower-owned processor that has the capacity and sometimes has given a dividend to growers at the end of the year, so that if they got a better price for the nuts than they were expecting, they return some of that to the growers. That hasn't happened in a little while now, but it's potentially going to happen this year, apparently. But we don't have any confirmation of that as at the time I'm filming this. Other than that, though, yeah, there is an undeniable incentive, unfortunately, on the handlers of macadamias to overestimate the crop in forecasting in order to then offer a lower price to the farmers who are going to supply that crop. So the question becomes, well, what do we do about that? You know, why is it that the crop is being estimated by the handlers of macadamias rather than the people who grow them? I mean, after all, yeah, we're the growers. Without, you know, us farming the nuts, there's nothing to handle. We're the ones with our ears to the ground, with our noses in our trees, looking at our 344s and going, where's all the nuts? Oh, there's a couple on this tree. But, you know, we're the ones who actually, you know, have the best idea of how our crop's going this year. And it's strange that when it comes to setting the forecast, the only people the AMS seems to consult are the people who buy the crop, not the people who make it. Now, I'm sure there's some excuse somewhere that you know, when they sit around a table, the macadamia handlers go, yeah, I spoke to a few farmers and they reckon it's good, or that sort of thing. But in terms of actual direct consultation of farmers, something that we can verify has happened, that just isn't present. So, you know, what would it take to fix that? Well, the CEO of the AMS, Claire Hamilton-Bate, loves to go on about how it's an all-of-industry society and it's great that she can speak for the whole industry when she goes to negotiate with governments and that sort of thing. That's fine as far as it goes, but don't try telling me that the Australian Macadamia Handlers Association is a whole-of-industry representation. It's not. It's processors only. And if you're putting the power of forecasting only in the hands of people who can use that to lower the price for farmers, then there's a chance that we're going to get a poor outcome. And if you look at the results for the past few years, there's been some fairly chronic overestimating of the crop, which, you know, you can't tell for sure, but, you know, on average should have cost the farmer money because assumptions were made about crop, didn't turn out to be true, but the farmers got the lower price based on the lower assumption anyway. And that's disappointing. So the AMS, if it is a whole of industry society, should, in my opinion, start consulting growers directly about what they think their crop's going to be. And look, that's not hard to do. The AMS often puts out surveys to their members, asking them for their comments or input on this or that, or have you been affected by the latest storm, and those sorts of things. And you should always respond to those surveys, by the way, because it is helpful, because they can use that data to secure things like government relief funds and that sort of stuff. But it wouldn't be hard to do SurveyMonkey or one of those various survey tools and just ask growers 3 simple questions. 1, what growing region do you operate in? 2, how many tonnes did you make last year? And 3, how many tonnes do you think you might make this year? And this is where you can lean on the experience of farmers who've done it for some years, who've been able to at least visually compare the situation in December, where you can see nuts on the trees, very much like these ones, and they can look around their own farm with their myriad of varieties and all sorts of other complications and give their best guess as to what the crop might be. Now, they won't always get it right. No one's suggesting that you know, farmers can predict that accurately what their crop is going to be. But it is likely to be more accurate than a bunch of guys from macadamia processing companies, most of whom don't grow a single nut themselves, sitting around a table and going, oh yeah, that's probably about it. And look, the input of growers, you know, I don't necessarily see that growers need to have their own association, although it seems curious that the handlers get one and we don't. But if the growers at least have some input, and then the Australian Macadamia Society takes input from the growers and input from the handlers and sets the crop forecast itself, then at least we've got, you know, a figure that has been arrived at by a fair process. And the other bonus as well, of course, is that if we get it wrong, if the forecast is wrong, then we all own that mistake. We've all contributed to that mistake because it's taken from that data. And you can drill down in the data as well, so that, you know, if you did that survey, you might find out that, for example, farmers in the Northern Rivers are feeling a little bit pessimistic about their crop this year. I don't hear much from the Bundaberg farmers, which my antenna tells me says they're probably having a good year, because, you know, like most farmers, we tend to complain more loudly than we celebrate. So, is that a good idea? Yeah, over to you guys. I mean, would you like to contribute to a survey? I know there's some people who ignore it, some people who say to the AMS, none of your business what I cropped last year and none of your business what I'm going to crop this year. But even if you don't get an 100% response rate, you can at least get some comparison amongst growers in the individual regions and look at general expectations. Are they up? Are they down? And then you can do the stats and go, right, well, most farmers feel we're going to get less than we did last year. Let's lower the forecast a bit. This particular year, the stats have come in that we've harvested just under 54,000 tonnes, nut in shell at 3.5% moisture. The original forecast was 56,000 tonnes, so this year it wasn't too far off. Now, in the middle of the year, they dropped the forecast substantially to below 50,000 tonnes before eventually they realised that there were a few more nuts in the system than they were fearing. And then, yeah, sort of we came back close to that original forecast. But it's only the original one that counts, guys, because this is the one that that's used to set the price for the growers. And we've got to try and get that as right as possible, because over the years there has been a lot of over forecasting, and I think the farmers have paid the price for that, because the margin of error is all based on giving our particular farmers less money in case of higher supply than demand. And I don't think in this particular industry that's a fair way to handle it, particularly now that we have the internet, we have email, we have the World Wide Web, and we can take surveys about crops from the very people who are growing them. So, love to hear some feedback, see what you think. Should forecasting be done by the people buying the crop who've got a bit of a financial conflict of interest, or should it be done by whole of industry, which is supposed to be the mantra in Australia of the Australian Macadamia Society? And I know it goes further than Australia too, because South Africa was a big miss this year. They were off their forecast by about 20,000 tonnes, and when the South African industry overestimates their crop, it affects the whole world, because we look at macadamia supply in global terms, and if global supply is up, that 20,000 tonne error affected Australian farmers as well, because we thought, lots and lots more nuts were going to be washing around the world market. Didn't turn out that way. So, love to hear from anyone all around the world. How does your country set its macadamia crop forecast? Is it like Australia? Should we improve it? Should the growers be standing up for their voice to be heard in the process? My view is yes. What's yours? Hope you have a lovely Christmas break, guys, and that you come back in the new year brighter and better than ever, and that we get a little bit of dry weather so I can get some of this grass down. All the best. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.